Yeah, we're coming at you from the Billy C studio in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Caligero, and it's time for our newest show, Billy C's Change My Mind. And I want to give you guys a little background on what we're trying to do here. Basically, we're going to be doing this show on a weekly basis right here on LDL TV. And it's going to be airing on Thursday nights at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're going to have a series of guests, whether they be boxing people, non-boxing people, fighters, anyone's eligible. And we're going to have already discussed a topic that they disagree with me on, and we're going to open up a platform and let them get an opportunity to change my mind. And they're going to have a half hour to do it. Now, joining us for the very first episode, and this is kind of right after the holidays, so we want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, is my main man, Daxx Khan. What's up, Dax?
How you doing? How's everybody? Hope everybody's Christmas is well.
Yeah, same to you, brother. Same to you. Daxx Khan, as you know, or maybe you don't know, is our lead writer and my right-hand man here at Billy C Boxing. And we thought it was fitting to have him kick off this show because when Dax and I met back several years ago, what we did was we met at the Carl Froch Jermaine Taylor fight, right? And when we were sitting next to each other and we were talking, and we started talking about fights like everybody does at fights, and one thing led to another. And Dax made this outrageous statement to me that he thought Lennox Lewis was a top heavyweight of all time, and I disagreed with him at the time. And over the years, he's kind of broken through a little bit there. And what we're going to do today is Daxx Khan's going to convince me. Now, Dax, well, you feel that Lennox Lewis is a top 10 fighter of all time, right?
No, not a top 10 fighter pound for pound of all time.
No, heavyweights. Heavyweight. Yeah. No, I meant heavyweight. I'm sorry. I meant heavyweight. So Dax says that Lennox Lewis, former world heavyweight champion, boxing Hall of Famer, great career. Dax feels that Lennox Lewis is a top 10 heavyweight, all-time great top 10 heavyweight. Top 10 heavyweight. I'm having a hard time speaking today. It must have been all the food I ate yesterday, Dax. But the bottom line is, Dax, change my mind, man. Come on. I don't think Lennox Lewis is a top 10 all-time great heavyweight. I just don't. As a matter of fact, in my list, I have him in my top 20 at number 20. Why is he top 10?
I don't know how he's not top 10. You know, this is the fighter who once did not have a home. Home to claim as a fighter. You know, coming from Jamaica, moving to England with his family as a boy, he had to go fight for Canada in the Olympics because they're the only ones that would allow him to represent themselves. In my opinion, not only is he a top 10 heavyweight of all time, he's a top 5 heavyweight of all time for so many reasons. And to think differently is insane. I mean, after winning the gold for Canada as a super heavyweight in 1988, being another one of the sport's highly respected heavyweights of the last 20 years, Riddick Bowe, Lennox turned pro in 1989 for the first phase of his career, because it was 2 phases of Lennox Lewis. And in the first phase of his career, an unrefined Lewis won his first 21 pro fights. He destroyed the field of Razor Ruddock, a guy who Mike Tyson himself said punched like a mule kick. Lennox beat every opponent he ever faced. In his 2 losses, they were against an iron-chinned Oliver McCall and Hasim Rahman. Rahman, who was highly thought of when they met the first time, had 2 losses. One was against a hard-hitting iron-jawed David Tua in a fight he was winning. And David Tua, again, was, highly respected, especially after that war he went to with Ike Ibeabuchi. And then the other one was against respected 2-time title holder Oleg Muskayev. Lennox's biggest downfall, and the only thing you can't change in him, and it really has nothing to do with his skill, has to do with his personality, and a lot of fighters go through it, is ego. Both fights, he came in unprepared and out of shape, but then again, he won both fights in spectacular fashion.
The rematches.
Oliver won, and McCall won. He was doing well. He got caught and dropped in the second round. McCall, no pushover. This was prior, of course, to his drug and alcohol use. Even to this day, he has one of the best chins we've ever seen. So Lennox not stopping him is no shame. But in the second bout, McCall was being beaten up and embarrassed so bad, he actually had a mental breakdown in the ring. And in his loss to Rothman, if we remember, he came in out of shape. The fight was in South Africa. He didn't go down in time to acclimate to the elevation. He had just been filming Ocean's 12. He arrived in South Africa, I believe it was a week before the fight. Overweight. He didn't take it seriously. He was actually grinning and looking away from the camera when he was caught by a thunderous punch. And if anything, Rothman could punch. There's no shame in losing to a puncher like that. And again, in the heavyweight division, one thing we all know, Billy, is that anybody can be knocked out at any point in time, no matter how good you are, because that's what makes the big men so exciting. But, you know, if Lennox would have came in condition in the first fight like he did in the second fight, remember, Rothman was scared, and he got hit with a punch so loud that you can hear it in the parking lot. As for Lennox, the fighter himself, he was the first big man, even in your admittance, to change the heavyweight complexion of how big men fight. And when I say big man, obviously everybody in the heavyweight division is a big man, but we're talking about the supersized heavyweight, which Lennox was really the first supersized heavyweight, because after that we had the influx of guys, the Michael Grants, the Klitschko's, everybody, you know, just seemed to be 6'4" and over. And, you know, he was the first big man to fight proper for his height. He had an awesome reach. I think it was 7 feet exactly, 84 inches. In the second phase of his career, Lennox got with the late great Emmanuel Stewart and was refined. He learned not only to use his reach, but his leverage. He used his jab. He, you know, that straight hand, he would lull opponents to sleep with the jab. He fought smart. He knew how to properly take advantage of all his natural skills. And he also, on top of that, even though he wasn't overly flamboyant, he also knew how to self-promote himself. He had great taglines, but he was a gentleman outside the ring.
Well, listen, you know, I don't dispute, and I know I've said this myself. You know, I don't dispute that Lennox Lewis was a talented fighter. I don't dispute that. You know, he fought everybody available to him. He avenged his 2 losses. I don't dispute any of that. And I also definitely, you know, support the line about him changing the complexion of the heavyweight division, because, you know, I've said that myself. But we're talking about all-time great top 10 heavyweight. Now, you know, in my opinion, Dax, you know, the bottom line is this. Yes, Lennox Lewis was a talented fighter. There's no question about it. Yes, he beat everybody that was available to him during his era, which is really the most important thing. That's all we can expect from a fighter, okay? But when you look at the list of other great heavyweights that in my opinion, are in front of him, and this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about all-time great top 10. I mean, just off the top of my head, you know, fighters that I have in front of him, you know, are like Jack Johnson, you know, Rocky Marciano, you know, Jack Dempsey, of course, Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis. I mean, how do you put him in with these guys in front of some of these guys?
Well, one, as we just got done saying, and you just mentioned yourself, you know, and we always talk about when Lennox Lewis, the one things we do agree upon is he fought smart. He fought like a big man. Nobody ever used their reach and their size like Lennox did. Lennox had exceptional footwork. He had exceptional speed. And believe it or not, he had an exceptional chin. Sure, his both losses were KOs, but we already discussed about that. But then again, look at the other fighters that he fought that, you know, were such solid punchers that Lennox just pretty much ate their shots and walked through. Ray Mercer, David Tua, Shannon Briggs, Tommy Morrison, they never hurt Lewis. You know, Lennox caught some huge punches from him. Frank Bruno's the only guy I actually remember wobbling Lennox, and again, that was in the first phase of him, and he never took him off his feet. Lennox had a killer instinct, and that right hand is an equalizer. You know, there's always that phrase, the last thing to go on a fighter is the power. But when you have the power on top of the skill and the ring smarts, which is more important than anything, because you have ring smarts, you can make up for other things that diminished in your career, like, you know, speed, head movement, as long as you know how to fight smart. Lennox always fought smart. And even in George Foreman's own words, he said it multiple times, Lennox Lewis was probably the hardest right-handed puncher he ever seen in his life. And Lennox Lewis, if he caught you with that right hand, now when you look at the top 10 all-time great heavyweight list, that, you know, that's standard for most people, and you wonder how or if Lewis can beat them, as we stated, his ring generalship and the power, look at that top 10 list. Floyd Patterson's on almost everybody's top 10 list. Are we actually to believe that Floyd Patterson's going to go in there and stand up to Lennox Lewis coming at him and catching him with one of those big right hands, boxing him? Floyd Patterson is supposed to leap in there and knock Lennox Lewis out. If David Tua couldn't knock Lennox Lewis out, and of course we're talking about in-shape Lennox Lewis, we're going to believe Floyd Patterson's going to do it? Hey, Rocky Marciano, as much as we all love him, he was just so outsized. I mean, we're talking about a light heavyweight against a super heavyweight, and Lennox was a lot better boxer than he was. And, you know, we sit and just name down the list and go down the list and go down the list. Just so many of them for so many reasons that, you know, I'm saying Lewis would beat them, definitely, but he had all the skills to beat them. They lost to lesser fighters than Lennox.
Well, I don't know. See, that's where the argument would start. You know, I don't have Floyd Patterson on my top 10 or even in my top 20, to be honest with you. No, I'm not taking anything away from Floyd Patterson. But just to give you an example, my top 10, all right, that I don't think Lennox Lewis would have beaten, you know, at all, despite the size and all of his attributes. Jack Johnson, Rocky Marciano, Dempsey, Ali, Joe Louis, Sonny Liston, James Jeffries, even Mike Tyson, who he had beaten, but you know, we're looking at not that Mike Tyson that fought Lennox at that time. Gene Tunney, Joe Frazier. I mean, those top 10 on my list, I believe every one of them could have easily beaten Lennox Lewis. And then when you go to the next 10, Holyfield, Larry Holmes, Sullivan, Jersey Joe Walcott, James Corbett, George Foreman, Bob Fitzsimmons, Ezra Charles, Sam Langford, and then at number 20, I got Lennox Lewis. I'm not saying he's not an all-time great fighter, but top 10, I just think it's hard to put him in there.
Rocky Marciano, are we really as tough as The Rock was? I'm sorry, he was no tougher than Evander Holyfield.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, he was in great shape. This was a guy that you know, never lost, and you know, he did fight tough opposition. People always discredit him for some of his opposition, but I mean, we could, like we always say, you can only go by who was there. And if you start picking apart the level of opposition that Lennox faced, I mean, come on, man, they were similar.
Lennox fought a very good level of opposition opponents. So, you know, we'll get into that, but I'm sorry, I can't. You know, Lennox Lewis's skill set was more complete than Jack Johnson's. Lennox Lewis's skill set. I mean, if Gene Tunney can give Jack Dempsey everything he can handle, drop him for the long count. Lennox Lewis, a man who hit that hard, who was that big, who used that reach that well, had that foot movement. I can't believe that he's not going to beat a small Jack Dempsey.
You're describing
every time.
You're describing
10 times. Lennox is going to win 7.
You're describing Lennox Lewis like he's Sugar Ray Robinson, a big version of him. Come on, man, he wasn't that great, and he never even did fight Riddick Bowe. That was the one fight everybody wanted to see.
Wouldn't fight him.
Well, you know, he fought Evander Holyfield. The fights that he fought Evander Holyfield in, you know, Evander was a small heavyweight, you know, and one of them was arguably could have went either way, a split decision. You know, he never stopped Holyfield. You know, you're talking about David Tua, who wasn't that talented. I look at one name when I think of Lennox Lewis, Hasim Rahman. Come on, the guy's a joke. Even in his best days, he was a joke. You know, and he beat Lennox Lewis. So I don't know, man. I just listen. I'm not discrediting him for being an all-time great fighter, but top 10, Dax. Come on, man.
Lennox was ahead on the scorecards when he beat Rahman. He came in out of shape, as we said. You know, this could go for any fighter, heavyweight or any division. You come in out of shape. You don't get acclimated to the altitude, and you just got done sitting on the movie set. He was way overweight. He was looking away, mugging for the camera, smiling. Hasim Rahman didn't beat Lennox Lewis. Arrogance beat Lennox Lewis. There's a big difference. Big difference. And Hasim Rahman, if anything, he can punch. Well,
he can punch. Then, you know, I mean, yes, I know you gave Oliver McCall credit. He can punch. Yeah, you gave Oliver McCall credit for having a granite chin. But look at the tape. This guy, Lennox Lewis, punched him several times flat. I mean, with no... he didn't even turn his head. He didn't even stun the guy. I mean, yeah, he can punch.
Who has?
He's 6'5", like you mentioned, 84-inch reach. I mean, yeah, he's a big dude, 250 pounds. Always was in shape for the most part. You know, yes, all those attributes, but top 10.
Even today, who stunned Oliver McCall?
Listen, I'm just saying, if
nobody has ever stunned Oliver McCall. There's no shame in not knocking him out, and that was the first phase of Lennox Lewis. Lennox got better as he got older. We forget that. Lennox Lewis, as he got older, especially the second phase, is the Emmanuel Stewart phase. I guess that's the phase this is pretty much the same phase of Vladimir Klitschko. As he got with Manny, he got better. Lennox learned to relax. He learned to, use that jab, learned to work behind things. He learned to use that movement, and then the killer instinct. Lennox had killer instinct just as well as any fighter in their prime. I don't care who it was, Mike Tyson, Dempsey, Liston, all the, so-called killers. George Foreman, Lennox Lewis had that instinct. Look at the tapes of Frank Bruno. Look at the tapes against Andrew Galata. Look at the tapes against Michael Grant. Lennox Lewis was a beast. He was an animal when he went after you, and you couldn't shake him. He was so big. He was so strong. You couldn't shake him. You couldn't get him on the inside. Even in his very last fight against Vitaly Klitschko, one who was a changed opponent, Lennox was preparing for Kirk Douglas. Again, he didn't really come in that out of shape. He lost those early rounds, which, by the way, in Lennox both losses, he got caught early. As the fight went on, he got stronger. As that fight was going on, he won the last 2 rounds. Vitaly won the first 4. The scorecards even tell you, and if you watch the tape on that, snapping Klitschko's head back, Klitschko was huffing, puffing, holding on. Lennox was too, don't get me wrong. If that fight wasn't stopped, Lennox would have took his eye out, took half his head off. In the future, you're going to tell me Vitaly Klitschko is going to be looked on as an all-time great? Maybe not top 10, but, again, the wins that he's done, the way he beat these guys, the 1990s, in so many people's opinions, was the second best era for heavyweight boxing, the 1990s and the early 2000s. You look at his opponent list, there was guys that were great prospects or decent champions, future champions. Believe me, none of them were no worse than the guys in the 80s that Mike Tyson went through. And yet, you know something, Lennox Lewis ruined him. Look what he did to Michael Grant. The beatdown he gave Andrew Galata. Andrew Galata gave Riddick Bowe hell, and everybody respects Riddick Bowe. They love Riddick Bowe. He was a great fighter. His personal life is what was bad for him, but, he just destroyed him. Shannon Briggs, big Shannon Briggs, another guy, several world championships. Shannon Briggs, he dropped him and just dropped him and dropped him. Lennox Lewis ruined fighters. He didn't just beat them, he ruined them. And to be able to ruin a fighter, that's special. You talk about Joe Louis, Lennox, in George Foreman's own words, if you go back and look at the archives of HBO announcing, George Foreman said so many times when the topic of heavyweights came up exactly how good Lennox was and how strong Lennox hit. If George Foreman dropped Joe Frazier the way he did, are you trying to tell me Lennox Lewis with a straight right hand coming from left field, one that he landed on Rothman, one that he landed on Michael Grant, one that he landed on Morrison, one that he landed on, Michael, you name them, as many times as Lennox dropped those guys, you're going to tell me that a little Joe Frazier isn't going to hit the canvas? Except Joe Frazier, we wouldn't have heard Howard Cosell in the back going, down goes Frazier, and Frazier getting up. That's it. It's over.
Well, come on. You mentioned, you say the 1990s was the next was a great era in boxing. Come on, half the fighters that he fought in the 90s were leftovers from Mike Tyson in the late 80s. You mentioned Frank Bruno several times. He's one of them. Tony Tucker was a bum that had a title. It was him. Donovan Razor Ruddock was a tough guy. I'll give him that much, but he wasn't a big guy. Mike Dixon was a journeyman fighter. Tyrell Biggs had been destroyed. These are all fighters in the 90s. I give him the Henry Akinwande fight because Akinwande was I thought was a talented fighter. Ray Mercer, talented fighter, but an older fighter. The Oliver McCalls, the Tommy Morrison. Come on, Tommy Morrison. You mentioned the Klitschko fight. Klitschko, it was his cheek that was right below his eye that was like basically looked like somebody sliced him up with
above the eye. Watch that tape again, above the eye.
It was it was by his cheek.
The whole eyebrow. You watch that tape again. Matter of fact, I have it on DVD. You can see they're sticking 3 and 4 of those big Q-tips, the ones that they use for up the nose inside there. I think he had, 80 stitches above that eye?
Well, the thing was that's why the fight was stopped, because of the cut. I mean, and he never fought him again.
And he was coming back.
He never fought him again.
Snappy. You watch him last 2 rounds. Matter of fact, I watched it again last night just to make sure I wasn't going to be talking out my other end today. The way he was snapping Vitaly's head. Vitaly was holding. He was hugging.
Well, I'm going to give him this.
But Lennox won those last 2 rounds.
I'm going to give Lennox. I'm going to give Lennox this. One thing that because I'll be honest, I never liked Lennox Lewis while he was active. However, when he retired and stayed retired, I've become more acceptant. I like him more now because he's a class act in and out of the ring. I'll always give him that. But I think that was one fight he should have come back for. Not come back after he let his career lie low for a while, but I'm saying he should have had another fight with Vitaly Klitschko. It seemed like he did not want to fight him, but nonetheless, I mean, I don't know. The Mike Tyson fight, you can't put, you can't say that was the same Mike Tyson that was, 2002. You can't say that was the same Mike Tyson that was wreaking havoc on the heavyweight division when Lennox destroyed Mike Tyson.
Was that Lennox's fault? Lennox would have fought him at any point in time.
Well, how come they never did?
For years.
Well, they never did. They never did. And
they called him out, though. It's not his fault that Team Tyson didn't answer.
You talk about Michael Grant. I don't know how much credit I give Grant. Francis Botha. David Tua. Yes, granite chin, but very, very limited in fight. Hasim Rahman, I think, was the worst thing that could have happened to Lennox Lewis. Really, when you look at him. Evander Holyfield a couple of times, good fight. But there was a lot of other guys that were. Shells of themselves that he fought. I mean, I'm not blaming him for that. That's all he had. But come on, top 10.
Where how many guys that are all-time greats? We'll take one here. An all-time great. It doesn't matter where you put him. I'm talking pound for pound all-time great. Overall in his career, James Toney. There's a guy that whether you rank him 20th, 50th, whatever, to be in an all-time great list, even in the top 100, is amazing when it comes to pound for pound. How many guys did James Toney lose to that he should have walked through? He came in unprepared. It was, arrogance, unfortunately, is a part of the sport. But, we have to base it on when this man was at his best, when he came in top shape, when this man came in complete physical condition. He gave it all in his training camps, and he walked down and he did what he was supposed to do. He was amazing. And as far as the retirement part, sure, I would have loved personally to see him come back and fight Klitschko again. Lennox was, he was criticized unfairly over that fight. Klitschko was winning early, like I said. He was overlooked. A lot of people didn't have that much respect for Vitaly because of the loss to Chris Bird when, he retired on the stool due to the shoulder. But, the fact that Lennox Lewis decided to stay retired after the Klitschko fight, you have to even give him twice respect because he knew he had lost his desire for rigorous training. He knew he was starting to lose some of his natural skill set. Father Time catches everyone, but Lennox knew he could go out either that way on his own, or he could be another one of those fighters that end up a stereotype where, I have to come back for that one more fight. You know what happens when they come back for that one more fight? We've seen it happen so many times. You just end up a name on the resume, or you end up really damaging your legacy. Either that or you end up seriously hurt. This is a man who turned down $50 million to come back. What's more important? Leaving, going the way he is on top as the heavyweight champion, or coming back with some money and, going out in a way that's, just undignified for a man of his class as a fighter. Muhammad Ali stayed around too long. Joe Louis stayed around too long. Jack Johnson stayed around too long. Evander Holyfield still stays around too long. Mike Tyson stayed around too long. In other divisions, Ray Leonard stayed around too long. Oscar De La Hoya, Julio Cesar Chavez, Roy Jones continues to make the mistakes. Sugar Ray Robinson. So for this man to go out and say, listen, to hang up his gloves and say, it's time for me to go. I have to retire. I'm not going to disgrace the sport. I'm not going to disgrace myself. There's no way you can't respect that. Yeah, again, we would all love me as well, and you can't get any bigger Lennox Lewis fan than me. But, to sit there and say, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to come back for any money in the world, that's the sign of greatness right there, because a lot of other guys, they'd have done it just for the payday.
Listen, I don't doubt that. I don't dispute that at all. And I just said that I respect him for that. But I mean, to put him in, I mean, for him knowing when to say when, which is very hard for fighters to do, that doesn't put him in above all those guys. In my opinion, it just doesn't, Listen, he's a great fighter. He's an all-time great fighter. He's a Hall of Famer. He had a great record, 41 wins, 32 coming by knockout. He only had 2 losses. He avenged both of those losses. He had 225 rounds as a professional. This guy was a former world champion, retired as a world champion. Listen, The
10
accolades
years
are there.
He ran that division.
What?
For 10 years. Holyfield's people didn't want to fight him. When they did fight him at the Garden, a pro-Holyfield crowd, they booed the draw.
Well, listen. Again, we're out of time here, and here's the bottom line. You make great points, Dax, about Lennox Lewis and stuff. Listen, he's a great fighter, and he changed the way we look at the heavyweight division. I don't think we'll ever see a guy like Jack Dempsey again. I don't think we'll ever have a heavyweight that's 5'11", 6 foot tall, weighing 210 pounds. I just don't think it'll ever happen, and I credit Lennox Lewis for that. And I'm not discrediting his great career nor his talent. But it's hard for me to put him above these guys because all the reasons that you said. He fought everybody who was available. So did Jack Johnson. So did Rocky Marciano. Jack Johnson. When you mention his name, everybody always says, "Oh, well, he didn't fight Sam Langford." He did fight Sam Langford, and he beat Sam Langford. Jack Dempsey. He lost his last 2 fights. That was the end of his career. Ali, yeah, he hung around too long. Joe Louis hung around too long. All those fighters, but to insert Lennox Lewis among those guys, for me, I just listen. You make some great points, and I will tell you this.
I got it. This is all the last thing I gotta say. But he beat every opponent he ever faced. He beat former, past, current world champions. He's an Olympic gold medal winner, one of the best right hands in the game. He was a master boxer. He learned from Emmanuel Stewart, who put him in the second phase of his game, 72% overall KO ratio, left the sport on his own terms as champion. He was a 10-year title holder. He was undisputed champion for 6 years. He beat all comers. He could fight bigger men and smaller men. He knew how to do it correctly each way. He ruined anybody who wanted to come in there and tried to prove him wrong. He could do it all. He was capable of beating anyone in every era, not just because of size, but because of the skill set too. Lennox, even if he was not 6'5", if he was 6'1", his skill set still was good enough to hang with anybody.
Wrong. That's where you're wrong. Okay, that's the point. Because if he wasn't 6'5" and he didn't have the size advantage over all the fighters that he fought in his era, he would not have been as dominant. That's the key. That's the same point that the Klitschko's have. Now if Lennox Lewis fought and all the other fighters were the same size as him, then maybe you could make that statement, but you can't make that statement with the fighters that he fought, because that is the big difference. He was the monster, just like Klitschko's are now. Listen, again, we only had a half hour and we're out, but here's the thing. I will tell you this, Dax. You make some great points about Lennox Lewis. I had him at number 20 on my list all time, and I clearly have jumped him up. I got to replace a guy like Evander Holyfield with Lennox Lewis right now. But I'm sorry to say, I cannot put him in, at least in my opinion, in my all-time great top 10 heavyweight list. So no, you did not change my mind on that. But you did change my mind a lot on Lennox Lewis over the years. There's no question about that. You hear me talk positively about him all the time. But as far as top 10, I don't know. Yeah, maybe my mind will change down the road. Maybe sometime in the future. But as of right now, no, I can't. I can't do it. But Lennox Lewis definitely is in the top 12. So he was in the top 20 when we started this conversation. So he's in the top 12 now. We're running out of time. This is what happens to Dax and I every time we have a disagreement. Time flies by when we're on the phone. Listen, I want to thank you, Dax, for coming on and kicking off this show. We're really going to be kicking it off after the first of the year. We wanted to give you guys a little taste of what you can expect. Everybody, including Dax, that comes on this show is going to get a prize. Dax will be sending you a T-shirt or something, so we'll talk about that. Everybody that participates, so make sure you drop us an email, billycboxing.com, or it's Bill at billycboxing.com, or Billy at talkinboxing, TALKINBOXING.
Here's the problem. Just like Dax knows Lennox Lewis is a top 10 heavyweight. Billy should have let Dax give out his email address because Dax knows it.
Yeah, I know. I'm under the weather, and Dax that was a low blow. Where's Joe Cortez when you need him? Break him apart right now. But great time. We're gonna have a lot of fun with this show, Dax, and I know you're gonna be back on frequently. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you very much for stopping by, and I want to thank all you guys for stopping by. And until next time, man, you know what? Make sure that you try to change my mind. Drop me an email, and we'll get you on, all right? Thanks a lot, man. Ciao.